Yacht Rock. For some, it's the ultimate companion to an imagined 70s and 80s yuppiehood, a brand of adult-oriented soft rock that's focused on hooking you in, dragging you aboard, and getting stuck in your head. But there's a weirdness to yacht rock that's not often explored. First of all, it's an extremely recent term. It only came around, I think, in 2006, and a lot of artists and listeners don't really enjoy its use. In fact, some even find it offensive. Some of you may have seen the Rick Beato video talking about yacht rock, and he makes some really good points advocating for, not using that term to describe this canon of music. And there are also plenty of individuals that are critical of the music itself, often finding it to be an embrace of 80s style consumerism. Although this isn't really something I've found to be a major theme among music that's generally considered to be yacht rock. Instead, I would say there's something more personal to yacht rock. Poppy, definitely, but personal. It's often happy-go-lucky, but it's just as frequently tainted with a melancholy longing. And the lyrics are often very introspective, telling very personal narrative stories. This is something you see over and over again with yacht rock. It's also, of course, not what the people who were performing or listening to this music back in the 70s would have called this genre. The name for this group of music only came about in 2005. Now, this doesn't make it a fake genre of music. Many genre names are applied retroactively, even ones as common as country music, which was originally called hillbilly music, then western, and then country and western, and then country western, and then just country, decades and decades later after the genre's founding. Now, I bring this up to show that there's a fluidity that's inherent in how we organize our music taxonomically, the names that we give the music that we listen to. Also, the name yacht rock, it came about from a loving mockery, which is a big reason why many people find it to be a poor descriptor. But again, this is just not infrequent when we look at how we name our genres. There are many genres whose names come out of some sort of criticism. A good example of this would be shoegaze, where critics kind of maligned the lack of theatricality in their performances because they were looking at their pedals on the floor, thus shoegaze. But as music fans, this back and forth should give us a moment's pause. As a category for sorting like music, it's been solidly and quickly accepted by mainstream listeners. And I think it does describe a moment in rock and roll history that wasn't previously well defined. Because there are a lot of older, more loose titles like the West Coast Sound, or one of the many portmanteau titles like mid-70s adult-oriented soft rock. Neither of which I find have like the stickiness and zing that yacht rock does. In this video, we're gonna dive unflinchingly into the insanity that is yacht rock, where it's from, what are its characteristics, and also why wherever the term seems to go, a internet flame war seems to follow. And as always, whenever I do a genre introduction, if you stick around to the end, I'll give you some great recommendations that can act as a sort of on-ramp if you're looking to get into the style. I'm David Hughes, you're watching Charcuterie Sound, and this week we're talking about yacht rock. Right now, the yacht rock sound seems to be having somewhat of a resurgence. There are popular indie acts like Matt Duncan, Parcels, Ginger Root, and they all seem to be borrowing certain elements from this fantastic period in rock and roll history. And I see why. I love this stuff. It's mellow, it's entertaining, it's surprisingly complex. But to explain, and I think for some defend that position, we're gonna have to look at the tension that exists at the heart of what yacht rock really is. You see, people tend to view yacht rock in one of two ways. One is boring, corporate, smooth, jazzified music for wealthy white people. The other is a deeply personal and technically complex genre, which succeeds in being both melodically interesting and kind of poppy, without losing its grooviness or complexity. But as you might have guessed, it's that first perspective where we encounter a problem. Some music, traditionally put under the yacht rock umbrella, has these qualities, some doesn't. A great example is Steely Dan, a technically impressive, groundbreaking, and endlessly creative group, with lyrics that certainly don't reflect some sort of urban, professional, yuppie elite. Donald Fagen, one of the group's founding members, is not a fan of this label. and he has colorfully expressed his feelings on the topic, which I understand. He doesn't want his music lumped in with more commercial, less technical projects, I would assume. At the same time, I do hear similarities that would tempt me to use the Yacht Rock label. And of course, this brings up the question, which has now become a common theme of this channel: what really makes a genre? Like, is it some objective collection of musical characteristics, or is it socially constructed? Like, if enough people call, dance music with strings disco, it's now disco. Or it could be just an organizational aid, a taxonomical tool to categorize like music. Now, there's no right answer. I think it's just different ways of looking at genre, but I find the last definition the most helpful. Now, personally, I don't have a problem with using the term yacht rock, but I could see why some don't like it. Just like the Rick Beato video, there are a lot of legitimate reasons as to why. As I mentioned previously, yacht rock as a term only came about in 2005, when it was the title of an independent mockumentary series online called Yacht Rock, and it follows the fictionalized lives of several of Yacht Rock's biggest acts. It's cringy, it's comedic, and it serves as a lighthearted satire to the time and the scene that it's investigating. Anyway, for me, the most notable thing here is that the creators gave this network of musicians, this scene, a concrete name that it didn't really have before. And it was thoughtfully and purposefully decided on. A joke about kind of like the idealized aesthetic of this genre that is something that's purely coming out of the creators of this series. I think the series creators kind of latched onto something here, a network of collaborating musicians that really didn't have a useful title. And the groups and artists that are fictionally represented in the series were actually collaborating in real life. And these are bands like the Doobie Brothers, Steely Dan, Kenny Loggins, Toto. As far as the origins of this scene go, it was largely out of Los Angeles, and it was largely among already successful studio musicians or musicians coming from other acts that were already successful, or musicians that pivoted their sound to this new popular yacht rock aesthetic. As far as musical influences go, they really come from disparate places. Of course, in the early 70s, the influence of the Beatles was still looming large over all of pop music. But early yacht rock seems to have emerged from a combination of jazz, the Beach Boys, and blue-eyed soul acts like Van Morrison. But let's get a little bit more specific here and see if we can't identify some common characteristics of the style. The music that's usually labeled as yacht rock definitely has a few defining characteristics. So let's break it down. Firstly, it is rock and roll, so expect the usual trio of guitar, bass guitar, and drums. But an addition that's often heavily used is the E-piano, often specifically a Fender Rhodes E-piano. And by the way, a little bit of a sidebar here, but the Rhodes E-piano is a product line that has been owned by a ridiculous number of companies, including the American Broadcasting Corporation, CBS, for some reason. So there's your connection between Steely Dan and NCIS. I bet you didn't see that coming. Anyway, as far as the electric guitar goes, it's usually used to aid in a bouncy kind of rhythm, sometimes with jangly, funk-like vamping. It's also often used to lay down clean melodic licks that may or may not mirror the vocal melody. And the drums in yacht rock are pretty cool. They're often a little funky. Don't be surprised by a heavy focus on the one, like you have in funk music. And if you want a more comprehensive explanation of that, check out my video on what makes funk funky. I'll put a link in the description. Lead vocals are of course smooth and clean with catchy melodies, as well as the frequent use of backing vocals and harmonies, usually a 2-person, 3-person harmony. The production on these albums is usually highly polished with really good sound separation. Musically, there's also a lot of borrowing from jazz and R&B. There's more complicated chordal harmonies. There's more freedom to move between different keys. You can borrow notes from other scales. You can use modes. And it's mellow, it's groovy, but definitely not as simple as some of the detractors of yacht rock might have you think. But as I referenced before, yacht rock is not just a category of music, it's also a scene. Basically anything touched by Donald Fagen or Michael McDonald. And this network is so deeply intertwined that it's been studied by data scientists and systems design experts. I'm not kidding. Just check out this article from the academic journal Poetics. Now, if you're any kind of music nerd, this is an interesting paper. It makes a very convincing argument for the existence of Yacht Rock as a network of frequent collaborators. Whether or not you think Yacht Rock is the right name for this scene, there's definitely something going on here. Here's the author's visualization of the collaboration network. They also found that on average, each Yacht Rock scene member collaborated with 21 to 28 musicians within the network at some point in their career, which is pretty cool. I have to say, I didn't think I was going to be able to find this quality of source when researching this topic. This is just awesome. I love running into this kind of stuff. So I still may not have convinced you, might not like the term Yacht Rock. Here are 6 great albums that I think capture this sound and this specific style. I get it, Steely Dan is very different from Toto. This is just what I would recommend to somebody if they were trying to get into this style of music. So here we have it, 6 fantastic Yacht Rock albums by 6 different artists and groups. First off, we have 1972's Can't Buy a Thrill by Steely Dan. Now, Steely Dan has an incredibly loyal and active fan base, and that's because there's something special. Even among such talented collaborators and peers, they really stand out. There's no album I can really pick that won't chafe some fans, so I'm just gonna go with what I think is their best entry point for those who are new to the Dan. And if you are new, first of all, welcome. Second, check out Reelin' in the Years, which I can almost guarantee you've heard before. And my personal favorite, Only a Fool would say that. Next up, we have the Doobie Brothers' 1973 album, The Captain and Me. This album started out as an attempt to quickly release new material off the momentum of their previous album, Toulouse Street. The band rapidly turned some of their practice jams and stage warm-ups into one of the best albums of this entire scene. Check out the songs China Grove and the country-influenced South City Midnight Lady. For number 3, we have Toto's eponymous 1978 album. No matter the breadth and depth of your music listening, you've definitely heard Africa by Toto, which is why I've chosen an album that doesn't include it. But Toto's self-titled effort has no shortage of radio hits, as well as a lot of great deeper cuts. Check out the song Georgie Porgy for a groovy good time and some great piano and bass arrangement. For our 4th recommendation, we have High Adventure by Kenny Loggins. Now, this is definitely leaning towards the poppier side of Yacht Rock, but I'm a total apologist for this record. The track Heart to Heart has a bit of cheese going on, but also some amazing vocal work and some great textural toppings via auxiliary percussion. And next up, we have Abandoned Luncheonette by Hall & Oates. Hall & Oates might also find themselves on the poppier side of Yacht Rock, but that does not mean that their music is simple or dull. Far from it. This one is good from beginning to end, and I would really go in blind without too much of a description. I think you'll be surprised if you've only heard their later stuff. And for our final recommendation, we have Mark Jordan's 1978 album, Mannequin. This is probably the album that flirts the most with smooth jazz on this list. So if that's your kryptonite, this might not be the album for you. But if you're into that mellow flip-flop rock kind of sound, you can't beat this classic album by Mark Jordan. Now, these episodes are always a little bit tough. There's a lot of hate for this term, and a lot of it's justified. At the same time, do musicians really get to choose their taxonomical labels? Not really. Frank Sinatra really hated being called a crooner. And many garage bands in the late 60s that were the first to be called punks by critics thought it was a bit dismissive. Maybe somebody will coin and popularize a new term, but until then, I think we're kind of stuck with Yacht Rock.